All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee and Cargo. Hope everyone's having a good morning so far. We'll just start with some introductions as people are still joining here. My name is Rachel. I work with the marketing team at Interlog. We have Emily Smith, who is our project manager, and we'll be going over some market updates later in the webinar. And then we have our two talkers, Benjamin Schwingle, who is our International Operations Director, and Justin Engelmeyer, who is our VP here at Interlog. So the two of them will have some conversations about the topics here today. To get into it, before we do kind of hold some time at the end for any questions. So as you're listening today and you have a question for us, pop it in the Q&A and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end. But agenda for this webinar is we're going to talk about the latest GRIs that have come up and what's coming in the future months and what we're seeing with that. And then get into some blank sailings on the next couple weeks and updates there. And then touch briefly on what's going on with the labor talks and end with some market updates. So again, if there's any questions, get in the Q&A, but we'll get started here right now. We're going to start with a poll before we get into the GRIs. So it should pop up on your screen here. And we're just curious if they've been impacting you and your shipments the last couple of weeks. And Ben and Justin, I'll let you guys take it from here.
Sure. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I think about over the past 10 days when they first announced that there was going to be a GRI on April 15th, they said that it was going to be a little bit more dramatic than it was. They mentioned that it could be upwards of $1,000, possibly more. And then throughout the course of last week, it kind of was falling through a little bit here, but they did settle at about $500. So that's the first increase we've seen in a while. I think that there's a lot of differences between these GRIs and some of the stuff that we were seeing in the pandemic. You know, it's not necessarily because there's so much congestion at the ports and there's so much pressure and people are shipping such large volumes. But I do think it's more along the lines that the carriers are currently, they're losing money. They dropped to such low rates that it's not sustainable. And that's where we're seeing blank sailings or a part of that. And so they need to put these GRIs out. And the timing, I think, and Ben, I'll let you touch on this too. The timing is also at the same time where they are speaking to all the BCOs, so the very large volume importers, and they're settling in contracts with those guys. And they're trying to push these rates up, the spot market rates, what all the MBOs are using and what we see. They're pushing those rates, and there's a lot of pressure to get those as high as they can. So the rates that they're locking in with the BCOs, you know, are underneath what the spot market rates are. So we're seeing them trying to push and get them up as high as they possibly can. Where they settle, we don't really know. You know, at the beginning of last week, we were told $1,000. And quickly after that, it started falling a little bit, and then it got to about 500. And now we're seeing the same thing for May 1st. Ben, I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on this here in addition, but it seems like maybe, I don't necessarily think they're going to hold at that, but you never know.
I agree. That's a good explanation of what happened there in April. It's a two-step process where a lot of contracts are being signed this week right now based on fluctuation of the spot market, and it helps boost it up. So it's two-step. April 15th, they're announcing almost $1,000, settled about half that. Now they're signing contracts and they'll have another GRI May 1st. I don't believe it's going to be another $1,000. I don't even think it's going to be another 500. I think it might be a little bit less, but there is a cost savings to getting your cargo booked and ingated before these increases happen. And we're in the start of the season where the rates will start rising.
Right. And I think, Ben, just to be clear here, because I do want to mention a couple of things within that. So last week, we were trying to tell our customers, hey, if you're importing something, if you can, try to get it in before the 15th. Let's push your suppliers if they can. If it's ready, let's shove it, let's get the containers in there, let's get it loaded, and let's get it ingated. And that was true. You know, we were able to save some money for our customers by doing that. But then there was a carrier or two, I believe, that they were the only ones that really didn't have a GRI. And so they have this capacity. They're saying, okay, you can book for any time through the end of April without a GRI. However, I know some of our customers are being told that by other vendors, by other forwarders, but there's no space on with those people. So they're already booked up until, the better half of May. They're booked into that. And so there's no capacity on that. It's not that there's no capacity on that lane, period. It's just with those carriers that didn't put the GRI on there. So it can be a little bit misleading. I think people really have to know, is there space? What is my booking? And not just blindly hope that you're going to get this rock bottom rate without these GRIs on it. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, without getting too granular, the one carrier in mind was Hapag-Lloyd. And if in a 2-week period, they're going to have 2 vessels departing from a certain seaport where suppliers loading. So if they don't announce the GRI and they're a $500 cheaper container, of course, they're going to get a lot of interest. They got overbooked on those 2 vessels. And the 3rd vessel had a schedule to accept containers on April 30th, but we found out just the other night that that vessel was delayed. So anyone booked on it was not going to be able to engage in that certain window of time. It wasn't a bait and switch, but it could have felt like it, where overcapacity suddenly occurred, and it all went hand in hand with their contract negotiation with the BCOs too. So they drew a lot of attention, built up a lot of booking orders, and in the end, only a certain number of customers are able to benefit from that. Those 2 vessels that departed from the port. But it's
Right.
a good.
Yeah. So our point is that you have to, or I guess what I'm getting at it is, you better be working with your forwarder, and you need to speak with them and make sure, do you actually have space? Are we on this? And update you if it's not going to happen, because, it seemed, if I put myself in the customer's point of view, it does seem like a bait and switch. If you're telling me, hey, yes, you can get this low rate, book with me. And then at the end, it's, well, sorry, you got a $500 GRI and we're moving it with someone else. That absolutely feels like a bait and switch. So it really is a conversation. You have to speak with them on how you're moving it, who you're moving it with.
And that was peculiar, like who you're moving it with. It's just one carrier offering that $500 savings. But
That could change in May, that someone else could do that in May. So it's just one of those things. Be careful.
There's a couple carriers of the low cost leaders, and then low cost by $50 container, with less stability when it comes to
Sure.
the schedule. And I think we'll get to those slides later in the presentation.
Yeah, and what we're talking about here with the GRIs. So this is the Trans-Pacific lane, right? So this isn't affecting Europe. This isn't affecting South America, India, all of that. This is the Trans-Pacific out of Asia. And these rates are going back up. And I think it's important to discuss the difference between the two. So, or this lane in particular versus all the others. So this lane in particular, over the pandemic, it reached such heights, such drastic heights, that then there was a ton of pressure for them to come back down. And they came flying down as probably faster than they went up. And they hit such rock bottom that the carriers aren't making money. And we heard, the CEO of Zim discussing that if they're going to lose money, they'd rather lose money without the vessels moving than shipping stuff and losing money, because that doesn't make sense to them. So this lane in particular, these lanes have a lot of pressure to figure out where they're going. They're bouncing back off these rock bottom lows. Whereas the other lanes, where you're talking about Europe, they're still higher. They didn't come plummeting. They're more what we discussed of settling. They're slightly coming down here, and they're still coming down. There's still room for them to come down. And same with South America. And Ben, how much more do you think those things are actually coming down? And you're seeing them come down at what type of rates? How much money are we talking about them coming down?
Europe and Brazil.
Yeah.
Europe rates tripled during the pandemic, and we've seen it come down not quite 50% of the height. So there's still room to move down hundreds of dollars month over month even per
Sure.
container. And
Is that
Brazil,
what you're seeing each month? They're coming down that much, several $100s, or?
it's taking steps, but it's not as predictable as you'd hope. So
Sure.
you have to be monitoring the things that are most important to the customer. Transit time, as a transshipment, what's the optimal routing? Sometimes $100 here or there isn't the cost savings you want to take because of the benefit of faster transit.
Sure. No, that makes sense. So, after this GRI, and I think, we'll be speaking about these a lot with our customers over the next couple of weeks. And I know people are trying to get as much as they can moved out before this other GRI hits on May 1st here. But I think that we do also have to pay attention to some of the blank sailings, and I believe that's our next slide here. But we're seeing on certain lanes at times they're fluctuating, and they're going up, and there's more blank sailings. And so, Ben, do you want to kind of go over this slide here so people can quickly see what we're talking about? Because the gray are the blank sailings, and the green means it's a go, right?
Yep, that's right. And I mean, this is an issue that's near and dear to us because where we can demonstrate a superior service is the flexibility to avoid those omitted sailings. And where the BCOs are going to get in a little trouble if they're stuck in a contract with only one carrier. I'm even taking the top two lines right there. You have carriers O&E, Hapag-Lloyd, Yang-Ming, and Hyundai. And they have two services to Los Angeles from Ningbo. Both will be omitted next week. So a quarter on their toes or with some flexibility to switch to a different carrier would be able to find that vessel and not have a 1 week delay. This is kind of a dramatic switch week over week, but 5 omissions to 11 next week out of 32 vessels that normally call Ningbo. That's the kind of ups and downs we're seeing and expect to see the rest of the summer.
And we saw something like the predictions of next week for Shanghai was 13, and I don't know if it was quite as drastic of a change, but still there's 13 blank sailings next week. What were we looking, what was pre-pandemic? Do you have any thought as to blank sailings back then? I mean, did they even exist? I mean, they existed, but not to this level.
They existed. I think everyone's tolerance then was a lot lower, where remember containers getting rolled a week. It was 10% of the time, 5% of the time that would happen. Now we're seeing some of those omissions are just standard, that they're going to stop the service until it makes sense to resume it. Others, it's up and down every week. So you're talking a third of your sailings almost, quarter for sure.
Right. And so it really is this balance that they're juggling, right, Ben? It's a balance of we're losing some money, so let's cut this off. And maybe we're making some more money, or we're moving more stuff on a specific lane, so we benefit more on that lane than others. So they're trying to figure out how much can we raise the rates where people are still going to move, and what lanes are we not going to be moving them on? And it's this they're trying to jostle and fit in where they're going to go and what their plan is for the future. That's what it sounds like with every single one of these carriers, and we hear their statements as to what they're doing. It sounds like they're trying to figure out how do we get through this, and where are we going to, if we're going to lose money, how do we lose the least amount possible?
That's right. It's a complicated strategy. They have to shift every week or two, looking far in advance, knowing what the demand may be.
Right. And what are your counterparts over in China and whatnot telling you? What are their thoughts?
A lot of the same conversations we're having here. I think
Sure.
from the supplier side, they wonder about confidence of the U.S. market. And I would never bet against U.S. consumers. And I think it will rise again. Employment is trending up again here. Inflation is seeing some suppression. And I'm very confident that quarters 3 and 4 this year will be much better than the first.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you too. I know from speaking with our customers that that's what they're saying, that things finally seem like, the worst is over, at least at the moment. And they're back on track to moving. Maybe not, as much as they want to. They might not be buying as much as they would want, but still at reasonable levels. And we're seeing a lot more consistency with our customers, I think, than we were in the first quarter. So
You could spend more time picking the part apart and explaining the benefits of working with flexible partners and showing what the carriers are thinking and forecasting. But you can see how we get announcements roughly 2 weeks in advance, 1 to 2 weeks in advance to be able to adjust.
right. All right, so this is, and you can see a lot of these, they say omit, some of them are, when we first see this, Ben, some of them are pending, so you don't necessarily know that following week, right? Sometimes it's still in flux, and you can see them actually deciding whether or not they're gonna do it.
And this is just the Ningbo port. If we looked at Shanghai, which is very close by, the same vessel might be calling Shanghai and skipping Ningbo.
Sure.
Or their master strategy.
Understood. All right, Rachel, what's our next topic here for? Yes, the labor talks. So, this is something where I think, at least from my point of view, and I know Rachel's putting up a poll here to see if you have any ports that you guys are experiencing some troubles or some issues. Primarily from our point of view, it seems one-offs here or there's where things do happen. It does happen from time to time, but I don't think it's consistent. And these labor talks and the issues that we're having, and I think we're all slightly fearful of what happened a couple of years ago. And it's one of those things, it's not an alarm. It's not to say this is going to happen. It's just something where they're still trying to figure out what they're doing over there, and it could happen. So it's just something to be mindful of and be aware that this could be around the corner, but I'm not, it very well could fizzle out. So those are my thoughts on it. Ben, you want to add something to that?
Who wants to add? The West Coast U.S. labor unions, they're doing what they always kind of do. Reminding everyone that they can flex their muscle. That poll question, I'd like to hear what some of those bad experiences were. If it was just due to bad weather, a certain time when the labor unions were striking, and perhaps that could have been forecasted as much as or more so than weather. Right now, moving through the West Coast is good on all ports. And although there's some weather affecting the rail through Canada, it's not causing much delay.
Yeah, very good. All right, Rachel. Okay.
All right. Some market updates just kind of on the Europe trade lane, and we do send out a recap email that will detail this more. Just kind of a brief overview of this. Rates have kind of dropped, kind of settled throughout the last couple of months, but still kind of remain higher than pre-pandemic rates. Space has been opening up, and carrier vessel scheduling is going to alter. Also, there is a European holiday on May 1st, May Day. So just keep that in mind when planning things. And just, again, the strikes out in France and Germany, things have kind of settled out there, but just keeping an eye on those. In Brazil, on that trade lane, again, those rates have also settled back down throughout the last couple of months. Space is available across all departures, and we expect changes to vessel schedules, blank sailings, and skipped ports of call. So those are a few market updates. Again, that will provide some more details on those in our recap email. But as we are kind of winding down this webinar, we did have a couple questions. One I did want to ask is, Ben and Justin, back to the GRI increases, do we have any idea on how long those GRI increases will last?
You know, at this moment, it's no, I personally don't have the crystal ball out that can tell us that. And in all honesty, I think that the carriers are doing their best to find a new bottom, because the bottom that they're at right now isn't sustainable for them. I think that's the point that I'm trying to make is they are losing a lot of money. I know they made a ton of money over the pandemic. So they can wait some of that out, but they need to get back to an area where they're able to be profitable. And the rates where they're at right now just isn't sustainable. So I think that the GRI, while they call it, it's the general rate increase, I think that it's going to be a new base at some point. Ben, your thoughts?
And the historic ceiling, just talking import Trans-Pacific to the West Coast. The ceiling from years ago was about double where we are right now. So that means that take another $500 GRI May 1st, there's still going to be $50, $150 GRIs every couple of weeks through till the end of October. Might have a peak season surcharge, but it's still the same thing, increases bi-weekly or monthly in increments of $100-ish.
And that could happen. I just know from experience before, you know, when you're talking about the 2011 era, 2012 and stuff, the carriers, it wasn't it wasn't just a straight line. So, you know, I don't know. I also feel like it could hold off. You could see stuff bounce around a little bit here. If for whatever reason, people start moving less, then, you know, if they ever raise the rates high enough where people say, we're going to hold off and we're just not going to import right now, then you're going to see it come back down, and then you would see it go back up as people gradually need to import more. So, you know, I think overall, I 100% agree with you, Ben. I think that overall it's going to kind of just keep creeping up, but it might not be a straight line, I guess is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I painted a picture of a straight line. That it's not what I meant to do. It will be a trend upwards with some fluctuation where people are on the whole going to benefit from shipping out sooner and in-gating before those increases happen. So work with someone that knows the schedules, knows when they can get containers into the ports to avoid those increases.
Right. So yeah, I think that's where your overall communication with your NVO, with your forwarder, is going to be very beneficial towards the importer. You have to have a sound understanding of what options are actually available at those rates, and if certain people are offering discounts, do they actually have capacity, and are you going to be in-gated before the next possible GRI? So I think it's a lot of communication and knowing and trusting your vendor and having a good relationship with them.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And I do see there's quite a few other questions, so we'll be reaching out to you guys individually on those. But just to wrap it up before we go, our next Coffee and Cargo is going to be May 17th, and it's going to be at 11 a.m. Central Time. So we are changing it to an hour later. And just to ask our audience here, I'm going to put up one more poll. Just wondering where you are, what time zone you are joining from. Would be nice to hear from our viewers. But if you guys want to join our monthly mailing list, what that means is you get our recap email the day after the webinars, and then we automatically sign you up for our webinars each month, just so you don't have to do it every time. If you'd like to be a part of that, you can email myself at rachel@interlogusa.com. But other than that, thank you guys for joining here, and we hope to see you next month. Emily, Ben, Justin, thank you. It's always been a pleasure, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone.